Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Breaking the Game podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Stephen Gillespie. My fellow co-host, Austin Carr, is here with me. Austin, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, Steven. How's it going today?
Man, everything is going good. My wife went to the doctor earlier today and got like the anatomy scan for our fourth child on the way, Charlotte. Everything's good, so
Hey,
life is breathing.
congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I'm making a dope dinner tonight whenever I'm done with this, and I'm
Hey,
super
that
excited about, man.
Sounds like a good plan to me.
Yeah, man. How about you? How's your week been?
Oh, it's been good. My wife actually had some pretty good news too. She got offered a raise at her job today, so she was thinking about leaving it, and they apparently like her. So that was good news. Been watching a lot of these good basketball games. There was a classic last night for sure. So it's been a good week.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm glad to hear your week's well. You ready to get down to business?
Yeah, let's do it. I think we got an exciting show today.
Absolutely, yeah. And we're going to go ahead and get started with, the idea that you brought forth to us to cover the power rankings. Mm-hmm. I want you to go ahead and give your breakdown of the Eastern Conference power rankings.
Okay, so just so everybody remembers, last week my top three in order were the Pacers, Boston, and then Toronto. This week I kind of just switched it up a little bit. I have Toronto first. They're 5-1. They've got wins against the top teams in the East and the West. They also beat Miami, and the only loss they had was that Boston loss. But I mean, they looked really good against the Bucks. And then I took Brooklyn. They're 5-2. You know what they've been doing, so shorthanded. They're missing 5 or 6 guys.
Mm-hmm.
Karis LeVert's been terrific. They beat the Clippers. They had to play Washington, Sacramento, a couple easier teams, but they beat Milwaukee too. And then lost to Orlando once and beat them once. And then I have Indiana at third. We talked about it last week. They had a couple good wins. Their only losses are against pretty good teams. Phoenix is still undefeated, and Miami just kind of seems like they have Indiana's number. I think that's the third or fourth time they've beat them this year. So, but I still think the Pacers are one of the 3 best teams in the East as far as so far in the bubble. What about you?
Yeah, it was, like you mentioned, it was a pretty good week for basketball, man. First off, I just want to say that I tuned into that Indiana Pacer Miami Heat game. Mm-hmm. Phenomenal game. I was blown away by it. We actually had a friendly bet. Oh, not really a bet, but just kind of like, hey, this is probably what's going to happen type thing with a couple of my buddies over at the Off the Ball Network, and and me and one of my buddies, Mo, told the rest of the guys that Jimmy Butler is going to hold T.J. Warren to under 19.5 points. And he did that, man. He shut him down completely in this. Yep, completely shut him down in the second half. But for any of you guys watching, haha, I told you so. Anyway, getting down to my Eastern Conference, I had Toronto number 1. They're 5-1 with wins against both number 1 seeds in the East and the Western Conference. Speaking of the Lakers and the Bucks. They beat Miami, which, I just got done bragging on them. And then a couple, important that they won them. It would have been really bad if they lost some games with the Magic and the Grizzlies. And then the only loss to the Boston Celtics, right? Much like you. And, we look at each other's notes a little bit, but it's not that we, just follow each other's opinion,
right?
Just for the sake of it. I also went with the Brooklyn Nets going 5-2, extremely shorthanded. Like, they're without, their backups, basically for these games, right? They beat Milwaukee, the Clippers, the Magic, the Kings, the Washington Wizards, and then, a loss against Boston, which really isn't too bad, but then the loss against the Bucks, that kind of hurts their resume a little bit. Mm-hmm. I have the Pacers completely out of my power rankings, though. I have the Boston Celtics in at number 3. They're 4-2. They just beat Toronto, right? Or they beat Toronto right in the bubble games, which the number 1 power ranking team to me in the East. Memphis, Portland, Brooklyn, lost against Milwaukee and Miami. Those are 2 pretty excusable losses to me in my eyes. If you're going to lose to teams, those are the teams that you probably want to lose to, right? So that rounds out my top 3. I had a really tough time, though, being honest, choosing between the Celtics and the Pacers. But ultimately, I ended up going with the Celtics because I feel like their wins are probably a little bit more equal, right? All things being considered. But the losses that Boston has, probably a little bit more forgivable in my eyes than the losses that the Pacers have.
I don't have an issue with anything you said. I mean, I did go back and forth between Boston and Indiana as well. I just didn't think one loss was enough to drop the number one team I had last week all the way out. So that's really why I left them at third. I didn't think one loss to the Heat, merited that far of a drop. So, I can see why you picked Boston too. Their losses are definitely, against two really good teams. So you can't really fault them for that. And they've beaten everybody that they're supposed to have beaten. So,
yeah. And like I said, I wrestled with that one up until, Boston just beat Memphis last night, right? So, like, that's what kind of was like, okay, I was kind of flirting with it a little bit. And there was a little bit of discussion whether or not Boston was going to go out and try to put out the Grizzlies because they had that number 3 seed locked up. We'll talk more about the seedings here in a little bit, Austin. But ultimately, that's why I went with that. I'm going to go ahead and lead off with the Western Conference just for the sake of tradition because I'm on the West Coast, right? So in the West, obviously, Austin, I don't know how you don't have this team number one if you don't, right? I know that we kind of changed our rankings on the fly. Our notes are always in flux, right? But the Phoenix Suns, like, their biggest wins to me are against, the Clippers, the Heat, the Thunder. You can kind of throw in Philadelphia. Dallas is a good team to beat. Indiana was a good team to beat. And then Washington, right? Going 7-0, I don't care what your schedule is. I don't care who you played against. I don't care if they were injured, if they rested people. I don't care. Really good teams aren't really showing really good records right now in the bubble. So going 7-0 is a big deal to me. Portland Trailblazers are my second team. I know that you're kind of a little bit on the fence with them a little bit, but I have Portland number 2. They're 5-2. They beat Denver, Houston, Philadelphia, and Memphis with losses to the Clippers and Boston. So again, not terrible teams to be losing to. If you have losses, which you don't want, but if you have them, those are the type of teams that you want to have on there when it comes to power rankings, right? And then rounding out my top 3 is the Houston Rockets, right? They just lost to to San Antonio and Portland, right? Those are their only 2 losses. But they beat the number 1 seeds in both conferences just like the Raptors did, right? They beat the Bucks and the Lakers. They beat Dallas. And they also beat a Sacramento team. So those are my top 3. Austin, what do you got to say to that?
I like your top 3, definitely. I'm not as on the fence about Portland as I was. They won me over a little bit.
There you go.
They definitely won me over a little bit. I think there is something to be said about what Phoenix is doing. You said regardless of schedule, but look at that schedule. They've kind of had a murderer's row compared to a lot of other teams.
Sure.
The only real game going into this that you look and see that, hey, Phoenix is definitely going to win this game is Washington.
Right.
All those other games before this started, you would have said, 1-6, and I didn't think they had a chance. So they were my number 1 team. Actually, the 3 teams that really have the most to play for are my 3 this week. I had Phoenix at number 1, and then I actually had San Antonio at number 2. And
I flirted with San Antonio. I flirted with them, man.
And then I had Portland at third. Portland's played really well, but I still just think a couple of those games were almost kind of handed to them. Just the Dallas, not the Dallas game, the Denver game specifically. And San Antonio's had some good wins with a team where I can name maybe 4 or 5 guys. They've got it's almost like the Nets where they're just pulling the 11th or 12th guy off the bench and getting a lot of production out of them. They've beaten Houston, they've beaten New Orleans, Utah, Sacramento, and Memphis. I mean, not the greatest schedule. They lost to the 2 teams that are probably, but other than Houston, the best 2 on their schedule. They lost to Denver and Philly. But I just think, Popovich, it's been, 22 years in a row they've made the playoffs. And
right. I think this season is what they're looking to make their 22nd in a row, right?
So, yeah. And I just think, too, though, it goes to show that, the best 3 teams, as far as I'm concerned, in the West are the 3 teams that are battling to get into that play-in tournament. It shows they had something to play for. And maybe it has something to do with the teams at the top just trying to get healthy and for the playoffs.
Sure, yeah, and again, I flirted with San Antonio, but really, it came down to San Antonio and Houston for me for who was going to be my 3rd seed in the West. And really, you went through the wins that San Antonio had. I'm not surprised that they won those games, but to me, Houston beating Milwaukee, Dallas, Lakers, and even Sacramento, which is a shared victory for both of those teams. I just looked at the at the wins for Houston. I know that they just lost to San Antonio, right? So I kind of get that, right? Like they took out the team that took out all these other teams, right? But ultimately, to me, the wins were more impressive for Houston than they were to San Antonio.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think I kind of just went with the head-to-head thing again, like I said last week or Sunday. I just think that they have the same record. How can I put one above the other if they just lost to them? That's kind of my only thinking there. Plus, it's kind of fun to have that narrative that those three teams that are at the bottom are the three teams that are playing the best too. So,
that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. All right, well, those are our power rankings there. Austin, do you want to go ahead and lead us into the next topic?
Yeah, so we're talking again a little bit about the play-in preview. The play-in game. There's probably not going to be one in the East. There isn't. Washington actually fell behind the Hornets and the Bulls, who are not even in the bubble.
Right. How do you fall behind two teams that aren't even in competition, right?
Right. I mean, it's hard to believe. It goes to show you that I think they probably just put Washington in there so they could justify the play-in tournament. That way they could have one for possibility of one on both sides.
Yeah, they were trying to be nice to the East.
But in the West, it's been awesome, I think. I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel
totally agree.
Given tons of these games a playoff feel already. And, there's just so many different scenarios. Last night, Portland overtook Memphis for the 8th seed. What did you think about that? I thought that was a pretty great game, first off.
Yeah, I actually tweeted that out right last night. I was like, well, if Memphis loses, which they played against the Celtics and they were down big when I tweeted that, so I felt comfortable saying like, well, hey, if Memphis loses this game and Portland beats Dallas, which I wasn't so really comfortable with saying, but it was just kind of what it was, right? In order for the Blazers to get in there, they had to beat Dallas. Dallas still had something to play for that night. You've seen Dallas rest Luka and KP one game already, right? Presumably for this game, so they can kind of maintain that 7th seed, right? I mean, which they ultimately will, right? But just keeping their guys sharp and things like that, right? But I thought it was a great game for Portland. They've been playing hungry all bubble long, but we can't necessarily count out right San Antonio, because what's interesting about the way that this these play-in games are going to work is that it's not just based off a record, right, Austin? It's based off a winning percentage.
So I actually have the whole list right here of all the different scenarios, and I'll kind of just run it down real quick. Portland will get the 8th seed if they win. They hold their own destiny. Or if all three of the other teams lose and they lose, they'll still get the 8th seed. They'll be 9th if they lose and two of either Phoenix, San Antonio, or Memphis also lose. So they have the best chance of at least making it into the play-in tournament. Memphis gets the 8th seed if they win and Portland loses, and they'll be the 9th seed with a win and a Portland win, or losses by Phoenix and San Antonio. So Memphis is still kind of in the driver's seat. If they can get a win, they're going to be in, but they haven't looked good. Next is Phoenix. Phoenix will get the 8th seed with a win combined with a Memphis loss and a Portland loss. So they can still get the 8th seed. And the 9th, they'll get that with a win combined with a Memphis or a Portland loss. So they need one of those two teams to lose, and they need to win for them to get in. So they need a little bit of help. And then San Antonio is basically in the same boat as Phoenix. A win combined with a Memphis loss, a Phoenix loss, and a Portland loss would get them to the 8th seed. And they'd be the 9th seed with a win plus 2 losses from from those 3 teams. So there's still 4 teams. There's all kinds of different scenarios. Obviously, like I said, Portland and Memphis kind of hold their destiny in their own hands. But there still is all kinds of interesting things that could happen.
Right, and a couple of points I just want to make to this, Austin, is one, I listened to the mismatch for the Ringer they have Kevin O'Connor and what's his name? Chris Vernon, excuse me. I don't know why. I listen to these guys every week. So I listened to KOC and Verno talking about this. There's a lot of speculation, right, that the Bucks may give Memphis this win, right, because Taylor Jenkins just came from that coaching tree not too long ago with Coach Bud. The Bucks have everything that they need, locked up. even their opening series you can look at as a warm up, right? And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But Memphis could be walking into this game with the expected win, so that kind of makes things a little bit cloudy for teams like San Antonio and Phoenix. Right. There's going to be what's great about this, right, is that there is absolutely going to be a play-in tournament. We just don't know who's sitting where, right? Most likely, it's going to be Portland in there somehow, some way. The second most likely is that Memphis is going to be in there somehow, some way. Ultimately, I would be a super big fan of seeing Portland and Phoenix face off against each other. I think.
I was just going to say that exact same thing. I really would like to see the Suns get in there. I mean, it's been a great story. If they could go 8-0 in this restart, that'd be crazy.
It would, right? And I had a couple of Phoenix Suns beat writers here on our show before we rebranded and brought you on. Right. And I was actually texting Logan Newman, who writes for Arizona Sports, and I was telling him, I was like, Logan, I was not worthy to have you on my show at all, man. And we were sitting here talking about each of their matchups, and Logan was like, look, Phoenix is, they're competent. There's a world where they could come in and win these games. And I'm like, all right, Logan, I get that you like Phoenix, but they're probably going to lose X, Y, and Z games. They may come out 2-6, maybe 3-5 if you're lucky, right? But no, not at all accurate or correct on my behalf. And I did message Logan. I was like, hey, man, because he was telling me, he's like, next time, he's like, I should have been more bold on your show instead of just saying hey, they're competent. I was like, well, hey, man, I'll have you back on the show and you could be as bold as you want. And I'll, basically just grovel at your feet, right?
Right. I mean, I don't think you're the only person that was wrong about Phoenix, though, for sure. I think he's probably about the only person that saw that coming, if he really did, He didn't see everything coming, right? He saw, there was a world where he looked at that they could come out maybe 5-3, 4-4, at best 6-2, right? He did not see 7-0, potentially 8-0 coming his way, right? But it was interesting to have him on and discuss, that would be fun. That would be fun. I'm gonna have to go back and give that one a listen for sure.
Yeah, man, for sure. You got to buff up on your own show's history, man. Come on, man.
I've listened to a couple. I haven't caught them all.
Yeah, they're long episodes though, and there's a lot of them. So it's hard. You've only been on. This is your second appearance, so I think I could forgive you, bro. But even after today, right? There's games on now, and just for the people watching and listening, either now or later, the games that are happening today had no effect on this conversation that we're having right now, which is, August the 12th, 2020, right? They have no bearing on whenever you're listening later. They had no bearing on what you're probably listening to right this second, and they are not going to have any bearing when we look at the awards and stuff like that we're going to be handing out in a little bit. But it's very cool to understand and know that the Western Conference is certainly going to have a play-in scenario. One thing that would have been cool, though, Austin, is if the NBA kept their original plan and to have the 7 and 8 seed compete against, the 9th and the 10th seed. Could you imagine how much more crazy this play-in scenario would have been?
I know. I don't think they expected it to be even as close as it's been. We're coming down to tomorrow night. There's 4 games that can all make a difference deciding this play-in tournament. So I can't even imagine, if they added 2 more teams to this. I mean, I could see them doing it in the future. I don't see why they wouldn't. I think it's worked wonders so far. I mean, like I said,
the Eastern Conference is why.
Yeah, that's true. But they could figure something out, and the East isn't always going to be so bad, We can
at the bottom, they won't be bad, right?
Yeah.
They're good at the top,
right? They do. It's a top heavy. It's definitely more top heavy conference in the West. But like I said, it gave these games a playoff feel already, and a lot of them have mattered where they probably wouldn't have otherwise. And I don't ever see anything wrong with more games that have stakes attached to them.
Yeah, 100%, man. And is there anything else that you want to talk about for the play-in scenario? We can just kind of recap. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the games are Saturday and Sunday if they need the Sunday game. They are at 2:30 in the afternoon on Saturday and 4:30. That's Eastern time on Sunday if they need to be. So just a reminder, the 8th seed only has to win 1 game. The 9th seed would have to win twice in a row, back-to-back days. That's pretty hard to do in the NBA.
And then roll in against the Lakers.
Right. So they're not they're not winning anything, any big grand prize or anything. They get to go up against AD and LeBron. So
yeah, here's your reward, right? But
right.
I mean, obviously the big favorite, the only team that I think that could push the Lakers to the edge in this scenario, right, are the Portland Trailblazers. Do you agree, or do you think Phoenix has a chance, or the Memphis Ja Morants?
I would be surprised if the Lakers lost more than a game to anybody but Portland. I could see Dame winning a game or two for him, or maybe even taking him to 7 games if he's just on fire like he has been. And I did want to mention one thing about Damian Lillard. He had his third 60-point game of the season last night. Do you know how many players have had 3 60-point games in one season?
Probably Wilt Chamberlain.
It's him and Wilt Chamberlain. That's it. The only 2 guys ever. So that was I thought that was pretty cool. So I mean, if he keeps up that, anything could happen. But I don't see any of the other teams getting in that would really even give the Lakers any trouble at all. So.
Yeah, I mean, and even still, Portland, as great as they've been offensively, their defense is kind of, they don't have anybody they can throw at Anthony Davis. They don't really have anybody they can throw at LeBron James. But we'll cover the West playoffs Sunday when we record our next episode that'll release next Monday. But yeah, we can roll right into the Eastern Conference playoff preview. The 1 through 3 seeder are set in stone, right? We know that Milwaukee's number 1. We know that Toronto's number 2 and Boston are number 3. That 4 through 6, though, it's looking,
it's up in the air a little bit. It could be. It's looking right now like it's going to be Heat and Pacers in the 4-5 and Celtics Sixers, but the Sixers could still jump the Pacers if they win out and the Pacers lose.
Yeah.
So it could be up in the air there. I've honestly always been of the impression that the Pacers should try to get to the 6th seed. I just think the Heat are a bad matchup for them. And if they could get lucky and let the Sixers knock them out, they might do a little bit better against the Celtics. I don't know. That might just be wishful thinking, but I don't think they're a very good matchup for the Heat. So that's kind of why I've always said that. But
it's going to be tough regardless. I mean, they don't even really match up well. The top half of their roster doesn't match up well against Boston either.
No, they don't. I think having Sabonis would make a big difference. Earlier in the year, it looked like they might be able to win a series or two, but I think Miami kind of shut the door on that idea. And they could have possibly moved up to get all the way to 3rd if they had gone like 8-0, I think, but I didn't see that happening. And I think they'd have a little bit better shot against the Sixers, but regardless, I don't see the Pacers really matching up well, like you said, with any of those teams.
Well, yeah, and we can go ahead and just for the sake of letting everybody know who may not be as up to date and current on the standings in the East as we are, right, Austin? So right now, it's looking like everything's basically set. Like there's a world that we live in where maybe 1 or 2 teams adjust in the East, but it's largely going to stay where it is, right? But if that were the case, we would have the 1 and 8 would be Milwaukee and Orlando. The 2 and 7 would be Toronto and Brooklyn. The 3 and 6 would be Boston and Philly, and then the 4 and 5 would be Miami and Indiana. We can start with the less interesting, I guess, is a decent way of putting it, right? Yeah. Just the 1 and 8, 2, 7. Work our way in towards the middle where it's probably going to be a little bit more competitive, Austin.
Right.
So for the 1 and 8, we have Milwaukee versus Orlando. The Bucks are 4-0 against the Magic this year, with victories looking like 123 to 91, 110 to 101, 111 to 100, and 111 to 95. Milwaukee is already without Jonathan Isaacs, who is probably their best defensive player, and Al-Farouq Aminu, who they've been without for most of the season already. The Bucks are largely healthy. Is there a chance that Milwaukee wins a game?
To put it plainly, no. I don't think so. Milwaukee's going to go 4-0 in that series. I think they're going to sweep. If you look at it, Giannis played 31 minutes a game this year. They're going to ramp that up in the playoffs. They may not even need to in the first round.
They may not.
Like you said, they're healthy. The Magic aren't. Jonathan Isaacs was having a pretty good season for them. I think he was a big piece, but I don't think that would have made much of a difference. The Bucks, they're the best offensive team. They're the best defensive team. Giannis is probably going to win the MVP. We'll get to that, I think.
Sure.
But I don't think the one thing that I see that the Bucks kind of don't do well is defend the three, and the Magic aren't, a knockdown killer 3-point shooting team. So I don't think they can take advantage of that enough to really even win a game. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so largely in agreement with you. I think, if you rolled the dice 100 times based on the odds, right, like Orlando may win a game. And it may just be that Milwaukee doesn't even put out anybody in the second half and Orlando just kind of chips away at a lead and maybe just make it a game in the fourth. That's like, I think, best case scenario, right? Milwaukee, they're deep, so they could probably continue that 30, 31 minutes per game with Giannis and those guys, right? Mm-hmm. They have a lot of depth. They have good vets. Their defense is great. The thing that kills me about Orlando, right, and being, when you consider them as a playoff contender, who's their go-to guy? Do they have a go-to guy?
I kind of don't think. I would say no. I don't think they do. Aaron Gordon's definitely not a go-to guy in the clutch that's going to get you a basket, and
he's been suffering with injury in the bubble too.
Right. Evan Fournier, I think, is one of their leading scorers, but he doesn't scare anybody. Against a team like Milwaukee, Chris Middleton's or Giannis or somebody, one of those Dante DiVincenzo, all those guys they're all lockdown defenders. I mean, he's not going to be able to do much against them. I'm not real impressed with Orlando all around. Vucevic is pretty good, their center. But
that's the wrong guy to have as your best player against the Bucks, though, because they shut down the paint.
Exactly. I mean, I think Brook Lopez, I think, was the fourth best rated defensive center in basketball this year. And I think a lot of that has to do with playing next to Giannis, but those two in there, I mean, you can't score in the paint at all against them.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, probably a clean sweep in both of our eyes. I think that we've both agreed. Actually, we both agree on the Bucks, and we both agree on them sweeping, right? So moving on to the next series, right? You have the 2-7, which is Toronto versus the Brooklyn basketball team, is what I like to call them, because they're hardly the Nets right now, right? They don't even have the same coach that they had coming into the year. So the Raptors versus the Brooklyn basketball team, who do you like in this game?
Well, for the series, definitely, I've got Toronto winning the series. Like you said, the Nets got rid of their coach, Kenny Atkinson. I think that was a big mistake, honestly. I think he was a terrific coach. I think you see it now almost like last year since Kyrie Irving's been out and they haven't had Durant all year. All these pieces that they have, they gel and they play well together. And, they've been pulling guys off the street coming into the bubble and they're putting up 24-point games. They're missing Durant, Kyrie Irving, DeAndre Jordan, Spencer Dinwiddie, Taurean Prince. And I know there's more guys.
Wilson Chandler.
But our whole team.
Claxton.
They're a match unit. And Karis LeVert has looked really good. Joe Harris has played well. I saw Kyle Anderson tied the record for most missed threes without him making a game, though. So that was so good. I could see him stealing a game or two. I like Toronto a lot. They're a solid team. They're deep. They're well coached. They play well on both sides of the ball, but they could be beaten. I like the Milwaukee Bucks don't really feel like they can be beaten by Orlando, even if they bring 80% of their best game. But Toronto is a team I feel like has to really bring it every night to really be elite. And they could get caught in a game, I think, a little bit easier than Milwaukee could, but I don't see them losing more than 1-2 if it really, if they really fell asleep.
I don't agree with that. I think that Toronto in this game, like, if they lose a game, I'll be shocked, right? And I'll eat a plate of crow here the next time we get together, and you could tell me that you told me so.
I just think the Nets are a pesky team. They play well together, and I just think they could steal one.
I mean, you almost feel like that they're like that they're a scheduled loss, right? Like we talked about this in our power rankings. Like they beat the team that's ahead of them. That's what they're supposed to do. They have like zero team chemistry. even the guys that they brought in to like be roster replacements, like Michael Beasley, when he found out that he was going to have to serve the rest of his suspension from a previous season, right? He was like, "Nah, I'm good. I'm not going to play." And then Jamal Crawford come in and play for, basically dribbled the ball one time and his body gave out on, which was awful because I was really looking forward to seeing him drop 50-something points in a game. But I don't know. Like Toronto, they've been resting guys basically throughout the bubble, just in different shifts. I think fully, like if you see a full Toronto Raptors lineup, they may kind of give you some Milwaukee looking numbers with their starters, right? Like maybe 30 minutes for a Kyle Lowry, maybe like 20, 25 minutes for a Gasol and an Ibaka, because they're deep. They got youth at almost every position too, right? Because Chris Boucher just gave them a really great game their last outing. So I would be hard pressed. I think I would give the Magic a better shot to get a game against Milwaukee right now than the Nets against the Raptors. Yeah, and I honestly would.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to this one when we've had some playoff games, and we'll see who was right. I mean, it could go either way. I could see both series being a clean sweep pretty easily, though, too.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. So the next one, this is where it starts getting a little fun, right? Because if you look at the 3-6 matchup, you have the Celtics versus the Sixers. Now, interesting note about this series matchup throughout the year, the Celtics have actually only won one time in their 4 matchups this season, right? They've lost, 107 to 93, 115 to 109, 109 to 98. Their one win was a pretty good win in 116 to 95. But the Sixers have a little bit of injury problems now, don't they, Austin?
Yeah, I think the big thing for the Sixers over the Celtics was they could just put out a lineup that was just so big they can overpower teams. With Ben Simmons playing point guard against a team that starts Kemba Walker and sometimes Marcus Smart next to him. Marcus Smart's a great defender, but he's 6'3", and Philadelphia could put out a lineup that was all 6, 8, or 9 or above. And now without Simmons, I think the Celtics are going to match up a little bit better. I also think, Embiid had that ankle injury. I don't know how long he's going to miss, if he'll be back, but I think that makes a big difference. The Celtics have looked really good. The Sixers have looked okay. And ultimately, I think the Celtics win that series, even though they've had a rough time against them this year. I don't know what you think about it. I do think the Sixers are a dangerous team if they could put it together. I don't know what happened to Al Horford this year, but he hasn't looked like Al Horford of old, for sure.
Well, I think what Al Horford's problem is just specifically fit. I think you put him on almost any other team and he's going to look significantly better. It's hard for a guy that had, it was basically their secondary creator on offense last year, right, for the Boston Celtics, and then one of their best defensive players to basically take a couple steps back on both sides of the ball. Like, he's given a smaller role and a smaller opportunity. It's hard for a guy to go where a lot of stuff's running through him on both sides of the ball to take a step back. I mean, he's doing it in such a way where he's not a problem for their team, which I think, if there's any bright spot for their team this year, it's how willing Horford has been to kind of just slowly but surely take a step back. Because when there's games where Embiid doesn't play, Horford has had some really good games this year. Sure. The problem is that, and I don't even know if you want to call it a problem, right? Like, Joel Embiid has probably had one of his healthier years this year than he has normally, right? So there was also that aspect or dynamic to it too, Austin, that he was basically insurance policy for Joel Embiid, who's missed quite a few games, right? But I keep hearing people say that, if Philly gets it together, time's up for me, you know what I mean? Like, I know that you still have the playoffs, and Brett Brown should not be their head coach next season. I think that he's been given too much. He's been given too many great players and too many chances to try to make them a viable team, especially in the Eastern Conference, right? Like, you can excuse Miami, Toronto, and maybe Boston, but that's where it starts getting iffy, right? Like, this was a team that was talked about as possibly coming out of the East to contend for a championship this year. Now you're looking at them as a 6th seed in the East.
Well, I agree with you 100% about Brett Brown. I said it last year. I thought this should be his last chance. A few years ago, people were talking about Embiid and Simmons like possibly being the next Kobe and Shaq. And, I know or Simmons hasn't developed a shot at all, and that's made a difference. But time's up, like you said. And don't get me wrong when I say if they put it together, I don't think they will. If they haven't by now, it's not going to happen. They either need a new voice at the top, which I think is going to happen,
Sure.
or shake up something, try something different.
Yeah, Elton Brand is not going to fire himself. You know what I mean?
Right. And I don't know. I don't think you give up on Embiid and Simmons together, but I think you try a different system, something else, because they're too talented to finish sixth in the East. They shouldn't be behind Indiana for sure, and they shouldn't be behind Miami. Miami's had a great year, and Miami's all, you hear that term heat culture all the time, but still, I mean, Embiid and Simmons should, like you said, they should be contending for the Eastern Conference Championship.
Yeah, well, to be clear, that's what other people say. Like, I wasn't a big fan of the moves that they made in the offseason. I made that pretty well known, I feel like. I wasn't asking too much of Josh Richardson, who was just a neat player in Miami, basically, right? He wasn't like a playmaker. Tobias Harris, he's still kind of young, actually, but he's been in the league long enough where you feel like you got a feel for, he's been in the league long enough to where you have a feel for the type of guy that he's going to be now. Joel Embiid, he doesn't have neither one of the two, right? Simmons doesn't have the type of dudes around him that make him the best player he could possibly be. And then the same thing for Joel Embiid. He doesn't have the type of dudes that are around him. As much as I actually like both of these players a lot. I think that there's still an argument that Joel Embiid is still one of the best centers in the NBA, even though people aren't a fan of his attitude or he takes nights off. If he's taking nights off and is still giving you like 25 and 13, like, my goodness, like that's
what I mean. They're so talented. Something's got to give at some point. That you see, like you said, people say that he's not fully invested, and he still is putting up incredible numbers night in and night out. Really, when he's out there, he changes their entire team defensively. And I liked what you said about Tobias Harris, and I think that's another fit problem. When he was at his best, other places in the league, he was in a pick and roll offense a lot, and he was used as the ball handler in the pick and roll a lot, and that's where he thrived. And he doesn't do that at all for Philadelphia. They kind of relegated him to stand out there and shoot when Simmons drives in or when Embiid kicks it out. And it works for some guys, but I just don't think that's the best use of his talents. And they do put out those huge lineups, but they also can't space the floor at all. And spacing and shooting is the name of the game in the NBA nowadays. The NBA is basically a shooting game, shooting and getting to the rim. And they can get to the rim, but they don't spread the floor at all. I think losing JJ Redick was the worst thing they ever did.
And Jimmy Butler too, right? So
yeah.
But one more thing before we move on to the next round, right? And I'll let you kind of give me your thoughts on this too. If Oklahoma City is still accepting draft picks, I know that they have, all four of their pockets full of draft picks right now.
Right.
But if they're still accepting draft picks, if I'm Philadelphia and I want to keep my job as a general manager and as a head coach, I would be calling up OKC and being like, hey, look, man, we'll trade you Tobias Harris and Al Horford for Chris Paul and Danilo Gallinari, and we'll give you 2 first-round draft picks, too, on top of that. I think Oklahoma City still they still get a couple guys, right, because Tobias Harris in that offense would probably be something, and then Al Horford is your backup center for a couple seasons behind, Steven Adams, because you still have Shea, and, you still have Baisley, who's looking all right, and you have all those draft picks. You can basically create your own team, basically make it a 2K offseason. That's right. What I think that would be. If I'm Philly, I would seriously consider making that trade.
Hey, I mean, I haven't heard anything else that sounds better than that if they're going to get rid of somebody. I mean, like I said, I don't think it's going to be Embiid and Simmons, and I don't think those two guys they got really fit. As far as on the Oklahoma City side, they made that Chris Paul trade for the future. Like, it wasn't necessarily to get Chris Paul, it was more to get those picks, and it was the only contract that really matched up with Russell Westbrook's. And he's been terrific, but I think their eyes are on all as get to the future, get as many picks as you can. I think, a lot of times nowadays in the NBA, the idea of a high draft pick is actually more valuable than once they actually take the player. And
sure.
So I think Oklahoma City has shown that they value picks more than probably just about any team. And I like the sound of that. I think it would be interesting. I like a good trade, man. I'm all about
yeah, me too.
Transactions are my thing for sure.
Because I think that Chris Paul, obviously a pick and roll with him and Simmons or him and Embiid would be pretty fun to watch. I mean, you can still do it with him and Gallo, right? And he's good enough off the ball to where he can give you some shots too. And then Gallinari is like probably one of the best players that you could imagine on a team with two guys that can't really shoot. Embiid can shoot, but he should be in the paint. So if you have Gallo and CP3 outside to kick the ball out to, I don't know.
Well, the Miami Heat messed up not getting Gallinari in that trade that they made at the deadline. I mean, they really, that would have made a big difference. I think Gallinari's skill set is perfect for today's game. He's a big wing that can shoot,
handle the ball a little bit.
Right, and look what Chris Paul did with DeAndre Jordan a few years ago. I mean, imagine what him and Embiid could look like together. I mean, he's the consummate, point guard. He's going to be the floor general. He's going to run the offense the right way. Everybody's going to be in the right positions, and I think you could run any kind of offense with a guy like him and a guy like Embiid. They could thrive together doing just about anything. And I don't see why it wouldn't be a good idea. It's just whether or not they could get it done.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. And now to the 4-5 matchup, and then we'll close out the Eastern Conference playoff preview, is the Heat versus the Pacers. The Heat are 3-0 against the Pacers this year. A really close game, 113-112. A not-so-close game, 122-108. And then another not-so-close game in 114-92. Not to mention that the Pacers are without Sabonis, but also a guy that I was really high on them picking up this offseason, which a lot of people slept on the Pacers, and I'm proud to say that I thought that they had a great offseason, and I was not surprised at all with the success they had this season. But they also got Jeremy Lamb from the Hornets when they completely overhauled their backcourt this year. So who do you like in this matchup, Austin?
Well, like I said, I'm from Indianapolis. I'm in some fan groups on Facebook for the Pacers, and I can tell you right now, all the way, I think, from the TJ Warren Butler matchup all the way down to the Pacers fans, Miami is in their heads. I just think Miami has their number. You see the fans on these pages; they lose their minds when every game against the Heat. They hate Jimmy Butler, and I think he thrives off of that. And I think it's almost worse for Miami that they're not going to play on the road in Indiana, because I think Jimmy Butler would kind of thrive off of that rivalry he's kind of built with TJ Warren. The Pacers are a good team. I definitely didn't sleep on them either. My wife is really, really big fan of the Pacers. She likes to rib me a lot that they beat the Lakers this year. We actually went to that game. But I think the Pacers they could win a game or two. It could be a close series. They're good enough to take a couple games. But Jimmy Butler and Bam, and they got the two rookies in Hero and Nunn that come in off the bench and are terrific. I just think ultimately they're going to be too much on defense, and like I said, I think they're in their heads. I think they have their number, and I think it'd be 4-2 probably Miami.
Yeah, I'm thinking like 4-1, 4-2 myself, and just their last matchup in the bubble, right, where they went to the half, both tied 43-43, and Miami just played an awful first half offensively, and you kind of got the feeling that if they got it figured out that they would come out and blow the brakes off of the Pacers, which is basically what happened. I think the Heat win this one, and it looks like we're largely in agreement that the Bucks, Raptors, Celtics, and Heat are all advancing, right? That's a big take because they're all the higher seeds, right? So we're coming in with these crazy predictions, right, that the that the higher ranked teams are going to come out. But I don't think that's – I mean – if any of these change, to me, it's the 4-5 matchup. Like, I think the Pacers probably have the better chance of beating the Heat than the Sixers do against the Celtics. That's really why I think that if there is an upset, it's that 4-5 matchup.
I agree. I think if there's going to be upsets anywhere, it's going to be in the Western Conference, which we'll get to on Sunday. But I'm not too worried about any of these picks. The one thing that is kind of interesting is they, not for the first round, but I did hear today for the second round, they are going to allow players to have up to 4 guests in the bubble with them once they're down to 8 teams. But they do have a stipulation that the guests have to prove that they have a long-standing personal relationship with the player. So no Instagram girlfriends. Or
no conjugal visits, basically.
That was a big topic on some of the stuff.
First Take, yeah,
that was on TV and everything today. But I don't see a whole lot of bumps in the or seeds in the East. Like we said, it's a top-heavy division conference, and I think the talent level from 1 to 4 is, the Pacers are close, but the top 4 teams are significantly better than the bottom 4 teams in the East for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that wraps up the preview for the Eastern Conference playoffs. Austin, do you want to bring us into our next segment?
Yeah, definitely. We're going to go into talking about our awards that we have, our season awards. You want to go ahead and give your award list first, or you want me to go first? We're doing our awards based on the finalists that were voted in, for the NBA finalists for all the players, the season awards.
You got the hot mic right now, man. You go ahead.
All right, sounds good. So for my MVP pick, I picked Giannis. Obviously, I think when they did the poll of everybody before the shutdown, he was either unanimous or it was really close. I think LeBron looked good this year. Harden, obviously, 34 points a game. He's a terrific scorer. But Giannis is putting up a season like we've hardly ever seen. His player efficiency rating right now would be the highest that there's ever been. Higher than Wilt Chamberlain, higher than Jordan, anybody. 30 and 13 and a half, basically playing 30 minutes a game. That's crazy efficiency.
Yeah.
And just you watch him on the court, he passes the eye test. I've never seen a guy that can take one dribble from a foot outside the 3-point line and dunk it. And I mean, you just can't stop him. And if he won the award last year, he's significantly better this year. I don't see how you can't give it to him again.
Yeah. Well, hang on, Austin. Here, I'm sorry. We're going to just change this up on the fly. How about we do each award? I'll let you lead and just come in. And
that's what I was kind of thinking too. Let's go ahead and do that.
All right, right on. Yeah, thanks, man. So I agree with you. Giannis, to me, is it. I think that you've seen more excuses for an MVP contender than any other year with LeBron James this season, and that's not to snub LeBron. This is my favorite LeBron James I've ever watched play basketball, and he's having a phenomenal season. I think that we kind of get caught up sometimes when you say, hey, I think that this player's better. People automatically assume that you're dogging the other one. That's not the case. LeBron James is, the second best regular season this year. May still be the best player in the world, but that's not what the intent of the award is. The intent of the award is for the best regular season. And to me, Giannis had it. He's the best player on the best team. He has a stronger winning percentage in the West than LeBron does against the East, which I think kind of helps squelch that, the East is trash argument, so to speak. You mentioned, his PER is, player impact effectiveness rating. He's leading in a lot of, traditional and advanced stats when it comes to LeBron James. Yes, LeBron James is doing a fantastic job at 35 years old in his 17th year in the NBA. No one's arguing or disputing that. Like what he's doing, being the number 1 team in the Western Conference at his age, being the best player, leading the NBA in assists per game, all great things, not squelching that at all. It just so happens that as great as the year LeBron James is having, Giannis is having an even better one, which is just insane considering he's already leading in so many categories, only giving you 30 minutes a game.
Right. That's I think the kicker. It's not unprecedented, the argument that, oh, look what he's doing at 35 years old. They did that when Kareem won his 6th MVP award. Everybody.
But how long ago was that though? You know what I mean?
That's what I mean. It's been a long time. It's been a long time, but it's not like it'd be the first time it ever happened. So there is a case to be made, but I don't strong one. Like we said, the 31 minutes a game is crazy. Like how many fourth quarters did he not even have to play in? Right. Just imagine if he had like a James Harden mindset where, I'm going to go out and get my numbers every night, or Russell Westbrook, I'm going to get my numbers regardless. I don't care if we're up by 15. I'm going to be out on the court. He could have put up insane numbers this year. And, if you want to talk counting stats, he's at the top of, every category. If you want to talk advanced stats, it makes an even stronger case for him. And I don't think there's a whole lot of dispute, and that's crazy considering the year LeBron had and the fact that James Harden is in a distant third, scoring 34 points a game.
Yeah. It's a two-headed race right now, and I think that it's a closer race when it comes to arguments than it even should be. If you took names and faces out of it and you just looked at who was playing better this year, like if you could just erase the name on the back of the jersey, I think Giannis would probably end up getting a unanimous MVP this season.
I agree.
You know what I mean? So, but yeah, do you want to go ahead and hit the next award up?
Yeah, so I went next with Defensive Player of the Year. Like I said, he's had a historic season. I think it deserves a historic award, so I picked Giannis again. It's happened twice before, in 88 and 94, Jordan and Hakeem Olajuwon. That's pretty good company to keep. Mm-hmm. But he's, like we said, he's the best team or best player on the best team, and not just the best team, the best offensive team and the best defensive team. I think it's about 11 points per 100 possessions less when he's on the court than when he's off. The team score against the Bucks. He's got the best defensive rating in basketball by almost four plus points per 100 possessions. Sure. He only blocks one shot and gets one steal a game, but the way the game has changed, those kind of stats, nobody blocks 4 shots a game anymore like Hakeem Olajuwon did. It's just a different type of game that's so much more spread out. But Rudy Gobert was another pick that I was high on, and he changes the Utah defense more than just about any player changes their team. But I just think Giannis makes a strong case to double up this year, like Jordan and like Hakeem. I just think he's a once-in-a-generation player, and I think he deserves that kind of recognition.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but to me, the reason I went with Rudy Gobert as my Defensive Player of the Year is look at the other defensive talents that Giannis has on his team. So when you look at like how he's impacting his team overall defensively, it's not just him. Like Brook Lopez was receiving a lot of consideration for this award as well. Like maybe on the lower end, sure, like he wasn't probably going to win it, but he was getting second and third place votes for sure.
Right.
So I think that when you have that kind of helps, all of those great defensive numbers that Giannis has. When you look at Rudy, it's just, he's just out there being the Stifle Tower. Bogdanovich and Ingles, they're kind of nifty, kind of, savvy defenders. They're not athletic defenders, you know what I mean?
Right.
Mike Conley at his age now, his defense has fallen off. Even Donovan Mitchell he's an undersized too, right? And he's not really giving you big defensive numbers. But you look at how the Jazz have maintained their great defensive ability, and you look at their great defensive numbers they have, that falls solely on the shoulders of Rudy Gobert. And I've talked about this with several people. He's actually one of the best big men when it comes down to, coming off of switches and staying with the quote-unquote little guy, at preventing them from attacking the basket because of his footwork, and obviously, he's got one of the longest reaches in the NBA too, so that certainly helps him. But it's not just long arms, right? It's his footwork, it's his study of film, it's his wherewithal of where players are going to go before they get there, and to me, I understand the historical significance that it would mean for Giannis to get this award, and I know how great of a year he's having. I just got done talking about that, right? He's a great two-way player, like probably one of the best, if not the best this season. To me, though, when I look at the importance of Defensive Player of the Year, if you took Giannis off of the Bucks, they would probably still have like a top 10 defense. You know what I mean? They probably still would. If you took Rudy off of the Utah defense, it would be trash. Like they would be like in the mid-20s, maybe at best.
Right, and I don't disagree with anything you just said. I know I'm not sure what their rank is, but without Gobert on the floor, I know Utah is not a top 10 defense, and with him, they're like fourth. Mm-hmm. So, I don't disagree with that. The one thing you can say is I hear a lot about how good the Milwaukee defense is, But I think a lot of those other players' defensive ratings are so high because of Giannis, not necessarily the other way around. It is a little bit of both. Giannis is first in defensive win shares, if you take that into account at all, but Gobert's second. Gobert's like fourth in the entire NBA in total win shares. It's crazy. Like he's like the second. He's 69% from the field. I mean, that's not defensive. I don't want to get too far off the topic.
Yeah.
But, the analytics really do back up Gobert. So, like I said, I went back and forth. I just, I kind of went with more the historical. I think Giannis is just having a season for the ages, and it needed to be recognized as such.
And I can agree with that. And I think too, sometimes, with Rudy already getting back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year awards, you kind of get tired of seeing the same dude always get named for the same award. It rarely happens, and especially Defensive Player of the Year, it rarely happens. So I think a little bit of, fatigue kind of wears in a little bit when it comes to awards sometimes as well.
I agree. I think it's the same thing with the MVP award sometimes. Jordan not winning it as many, Jordan probably should have won it a few more times than he did if it weren't for the fact that he'd already won it 5 times in a row.
Karl Malone. Yeah,
exactly. Next up for Rookie of the Year, I had a really hard time not picking Zion, believe it or not.
What?
I wanted to just to get your reaction more than anything.
Okay.
But I ultimately couldn't make enough of a case in 15 games. I mean,
19 games. Give him a little bit more credit. Give him a little bit more credit.
19 games, my bad. Thank you for keeping me honest.
That's what I'm here for, bro.
Right. That being said, I think if you just make the argument for who's the best rookie, it's Zion, but that's not what the Rookie of the Year is. It's who had the best rookie season, and that's obviously Ja Morant. 17 or 18 points a game, 7 or 8 assists. He was already in the top, I think, 7 or 8 in the league in assists, and he makes plays every night that just make you say, wow. He's extremely athletic. He can already shoot the ball pretty well. He's not the biggest guy, but he's so quick. He sees the floor like a veteran, and there's not a whole lot of rookie point guards that don't get overwhelmed in their rookie season. It's a hard position to play in the NBA. You have to run the whole team. And I think it helps him coming in to a pretty young team in Memphis. So there's not a whole lot of, established stars or veterans there. That
Mousy has a feed.
Right. And so he can kind of make it his team right away. Because their other best players are, Jaren Jackson and Brandon Clark, who are both young. And Dylan Brooks hasn't been around that long. So I think he came into the right situation to be able to take over a team, but it's Derrick Rose is about the only other rookie point guard I really remember thriving to that point, to that extent, other than Ja, and I just think he had a terrific season.
Yeah, maybe in recent memory, right? Like Chris Paul was another great guy that you had. But yeah, I see what you're saying when it comes to who is probably the closest as far as talent more recently. It was probably him. There were some other guys that had great years, but yeah. And plus, doesn't it seem like Ja Morant? He's like an airbender, dude. Like he just stays in the air so long. Mm-hmm. I hear this said over and over, and I can't help but agree. Like his misses are just more spectacular than a lot of people's made shots. Like he's so fun to watch, man. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about this award because I feel like, naming other guys, it's nice for them, to develop their storyline. But, the whole battle, the whole case for Zion getting it doesn't hold that much weight to me because I've heard, folks like Rachel Nichols make this award, right? Like when Joel Embiid didn't get it over Malcolm Brogdon, right, because of the games played. She said, Joel Embiid is clearly the better player out of the two, so you just give it to him for, the history of the NBA. That way when his Joel just keeps getting better and better, he has that award, he has that cachet. You don't have that argument, though, here because Ja Morant is not a Malcolm Brogdon to Zion's Joel Embiid. He's not. Like, they're both superstars, Ja is going to be just as big of a danger to the future of the NBA than Zion is in my eyes because you look at what he's doing this year. I mean, Memphis was supposed to be like the worst team in the West this year, and they're still hanging on right now to try to get into the 8th seed. They'll probably be in a play-in unless they just completely lose outright. But it shouldn't even be a discussion in my eyes. But yeah, that would have gotten a heck of a reaction if you came in here straight face and told me that was Zion.
Right. Oh, I'm sure. No, you're not wrong. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think John Morant's a generational talent at point guard. I think him and Zion are and those two, Luka and Giannis. I mean, the league's in good hands for the future. Those guys are
Jason Tatum. Don't forget about my guy, Jason Tatum.
Jason Tatum. We'll see. I don't think he's quite on their level, but he's good. He's terrific. He is terrific.
Right on.
Okay, we'll keep this moving. Next, sixth man, I went with Dennis Schroeder. I think he's the best backup point guard in the league. I think, it's kind of awesome. The Thunder have probably one of the 2 or 3 best starting point guards in the league this year, as far as just this year, not overall. Chris Paul is terrific, but I think if you gave a list right now of the best point guards, maybe he's not at the top, but he did have a terrific season. But Schroeder's his backup on a team that really needed him to score for that second unit. I don't think Thunder had a whole lot of offensive punch other than him. And, he put up almost 19 points a game off the bench. And he came off the bench a lot for Atlanta. And I remember when he was there was talk about him taking over the starting spot over Teague. And, he's always excelled.
Neither one of those guys are there anymore.
Right. But, he's in Oklahoma City, and I had a hard time not taking Montrezl Harrell. I like him, but I think the Thunder needed Dennis Schroeder more than the Clippers needed Harrell, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. And one of the best cases I heard, right, is that if the Clippers have 2 guys in the in the running for it, how much more impressive is it that Schroeder made it when the Clippers had 2 names in the list, right? But ultimately, and just some more credit to Schroeder, right? Like he's a part of one of the most clutch lineups in the NBA this season, right? When OKC runs Shea, CP3, and Schroeder, right?
Right.
But to me, like what you're seeing with Montrezl Harrell being out of the Clippers rotation right now, I know that the award is based off of by that March 11th cutoff date, right? But you can still see it now, like how important Trez is to the Clippers, because they are missing that inside presence that he gives them. But on both ends, right? Like I think his defense doesn't get talked about enough. He's not a world beater on that end, but he's definitely capable. He's probably like slightly above league average. He's not like an elite defensive talent, but he's certainly a high energy, high effort guy. He's very efficient. This year his game has expanded to kind of a triple threat. Like, not saying he's as talented as Carmelo Anthony, but like on the elbow where he can kind of give you a couple little jab steps and make a move for a center, right? That's quite impressive. I think that he's got the ultimate, skill set that makes the Clippers as dangerous as they are. He's giving you about 18 points per game, which is more than what Schroeder is giving you, right, for Oklahoma City. And he has to share the ball. So imagine if he was in Schroeder's shoes, right, where he was the only 6th man, right? Like you're probably looking at like probably a 20 points per game score coming off of the bench.
He already almost was, even with the Clippers, with as deep a team as they have. He still put up big numbers, and that's why I said it was a difficult decision. Another thing, I think Montrezl Harrell is the kind of the heart and soul of that team. He's a little bit like he's the guy that gives them their fire, their edge a little bit. Like Kawhi's a killer, don't get me wrong, but he never says a word.
Yeah, he's just a machine.
He's a pretty relatively unassuming superstar. I kind of thought that beef he tried to have with Damian Lillard was pretty goofy. He just
yeah, come on, guy.
It's not him and Damian.
You don't want that. He doesn't want that either.
The wrong guy to get into an altercation with on Twitter, regardless. But Paul George isn't that guy either. And Patrick Beverley is a little bit, but Lou Williams is fairly more unassuming. He goes out and gets buckets, and he's a flashy player, but he doesn't talk in the media a lot, and he doesn't seem to be the guy that's going to fire you up. Whereas I think Montrezl Harrell really brings that, just that edge and extra, just a little bit more toughness that they kind of need. And so, I agree with your pick in a sense. I just went with Schroeder because, like I said, I mean, Andre Roberson and Lugens Dort aren't going to score a whole lot of points up for you off the bench, and they're in the regular rotation for that Thunder team. And I just think he meant more to that second unit than probably any of the other 6-man finalists meant to their team.
And that's a fair point. So next one, you got most improved player. We agree on who the selection is. I want you to go ahead and give the case for Mr. Bam Adebayo.
Yeah, I think he's always kind of played with that man against boys kind of feel. Even since he's been in the NBA, he just looks the part, But this year he doubled his scoring average. He more than doubled his assist average. His shooting percentages haven't gone down at all. He's a much better defender. And, what you said about Montrezl Harrell is true for Bam, all those things, I think. Plus, he is an elite defender. And I think
better than Trez. I'll say that right now. He's better than Trez.
I think he's on his way to becoming one of the elite rim protectors in the NBA. And he's not just a big athlete either. He can play. And I wasn't sure that he could coming out of Kentucky.
I don't think that a lot of people were, and
right.
You're talking about how he's doubling and doubling and doubling. How about averaging a double-double with 5 assists per game and still giving people the business on the defensive end, right? Like, what cracks me up so much is like how no one talked about the things that he's great at now, is was on their radar, right? Like his rebounding was a thing, and obviously that's been really, really good this season. Not a lot of people talked about his offensive versatility coming into the NBA, which is what we're seeing now, and especially the playmaking. I think that he's probably about 2 pegs down from Jokic as far as being like up there in terms of playmaking big men, but just a great player.
I just think he's one of those guys that falls under that. Just in college, you have to play your coach's system, and some guys just don't fit the system that they're in. And Kentucky needed a traditional big man to just park in the lane and get rebounds and kick it out to their perimeter players, and that's what he did. He did what he was asked to do. I just don't think anybody got really the chance to see how versatile he could be. And Miami traditionally doesn't draft all that well. I mean, they got Dwayne Wade, but other than that, in the first round. They're good at finding diamonds in the rough, though. And, I think he was like the 14th or 15th pick. He wasn't even a lottery pick. And he might end up being, one of the best 2 or 3 guys from his draft when it's all said and done.
I mean, they're drafting well now. I mean, you couple him with Tyler Hero. Like, they're drafting well now. And plus, their developmental program is on point. They were just such a veteran team for a long time that they didn't really have to rely on the draft as much as what you see now, right?
Right.
But yeah, I agree. And plus, like, he just looked, like you mentioned about looking the part, like he looks like a young Dwight Howard to me, especially like in the shoulders area. Like he's like just completely just right angles at his shoulders. Like he's a freak of nature on that end of the ball.
Agreed. That's what I mean when I say that he's got that man against boys feel. He's been that way since he was 18 years old. He's just a beast.
Mm-hmm.
So the last award we have is Coach of the Year. I think we disagreed on this one, although
it looks like it.
I actually would have no problem with who you picked. I went with Billy Donovan. I think for the same argument as why you went with who you went with, because I mean he lost Paul George, he lost Russell Westbrook, and he was given a less than 1% chance to make the playoffs, and they're going to be the 4th or 5th seed. I think 5th. I think is what they're probably going to get in the West. And I mean, he can't say enough. He's pulled all the right strings. He's put his players in the best position to win. I think obviously having Chris Paul helps. He's an extension of the coach on the court for sure.
Absolutely.
But I could have gone a lot of ways with this. There was a lot of good coaching performances this year for sure.
Yeah, and I think one of my favorite things to pay attention to when it comes to NBA storylines is coaching, and it's specifically for debates like this. I did a segment earlier in the year, I believe it was in January, where my top 3 and bottom 3 coaches that I picked, and the guy that you picked, Billy Donovan, I think was 3rd when it came to overall coaching, and it was for a lot of the reasons that you said. But to me, if you have a Chris Paul led team, I don't care who the head coach is, right?
Yeah.
For them to be fifth in the West, like that's not a big surprise. Considering too that like they have very capable players. Like SGA had a great rookie year last year. You know, Schroeder played off the bench the last season and was familiar with his role. Danilo Gallinari is kind of like if he was in the East his whole career, he might have been an All-Star once or twice, right? Steven Adams is a great center. You know, they have great talent. You bring in a guy like Chris Paul. Not surprised to see that they did as well as they did. But you do make a great point that they lost 2 star players, right? But look at this. The Raptors lost 2 starters too, right? They lost obvious star in Kawhi Leonard and an all-defensive player in Danny Green. Not only that, but they led the entire NBA when it came to games without rotational players. Like he led the entire NBA. Not only did they make the second seed for consecutive years in the East, but they actually improved their winning percentage off of a championship winning year. So all of those things considered to me is why Nick Nurse deserves to be the coach of the year in my eyes.
Hey, you know, if we're being honest, you're probably not wrong. Like I said, I could see it going either way. I think I'm hearing a lot about Billy Donovan. I'm hearing a lot about Nick Nurse, and I'm not sure. I think it's a kind of a toss-up. I wouldn't be upset with it going either way, really.
I would be really upset if it, like, even if you took Nurse out of it, I think that you give it to Budenholzer out of Milwaukee, and I think that you give it to Rick Carlisle too, because if you look at because yes, they had Luka and KP, but that was kind of a copy and paste roster, man. Like no one knew that leading Dallas to one of the best offenses in the entire NBA is up there. You look at what Boston had to overcome from last year to this year too. So I think Brad Stevens and then Nate McMillan too. Like Nate McMillan deserves just as much credit to me as Billy Donovan does. So
believe me, if you lived in Indianapolis, everybody here, I agree with you. Everybody here would tell you and me were crazy. They all thought McMillan was going to get fired. They all think he's deserved.
He just got extended today. Did you see that? Yeah,
I saw that. Believe me, I saw that. I wasn't surprised by it at all. But that's what I mean.
Well deserved.
It's funny to be around the team and not really be a huge fan of them, so I can kind of keep it objective. But I mean, there's so many people that were calling for his head, and I just didn't see why. I think he had a great year too. You know, like I said, there's a lot of great coaching performances this year. I think the Thunder really surprised people more than any other team.
Yeah, or even Taylor Jenkins. You can throw him in that conversation too, because they were like projected to be the worst team in the West. True. I just think that if you're putting Billy Donovan in the conversation, not that he's, like I said, he was my third coach early in January, right? Like, I just think if you start entering in a guy who's not really a contender for a championship this year outside of Bud and Nurse, you can start making the exact same case as you're making for Donovan, for guys like Stevens, for a guy like Carlisle, McMillan. You know, there's a number of coaches that have that Taylor Jenkins, a number of coaches that you can make that same argument for. And let's not forget, too, that Donovan is doing it with probably one of the best point guards of all time, captaining his team.
Oh, that's true. And, if you ask guys around the league and other coaches, from what I hear, from what I've heard on TV and stuff, Brad Stevens could win that award every year. Brad Stevens is a basketball genius from what everybody says. And, that's something, too, that I think as fans and viewers on the outside, it's hard to really understand the different levels of how much better one guy is than another, because they all are great coaches to even make it to the NBA. There are some bad ones. Not every coach deserves their job. But, when we're talking the very best of the best, all these guys are terrific coaches. And we don't even really see a lot of times everything that goes into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, now we're coming into the conversation that I'm looking forward to the most. And this is one where we talked about, and I'll just go ahead and spoil it. You can see it scrolling across your screen right now. We're talking about the bubble teams. Right. Austin, you provided a great kind of alternate team to throw in here, because I was thinking about the concept of it without officially titling it, because there was a number of guys in the bubble that just kind of took everyone by surprise with their play this year. Do you just want to kind of dive into what I just alluded to there, Austin?
Yeah, so rather than just do an all bubble first and second team, we also decided to give you guys a bubble breakout team. These are guys that maybe weren't the best of the best, but weren't what gave you a lot more than what you expected from them. Some are guys you're going to know. I think I at least have one guy on my team that, unless you're a really hardcore fan, you haven't heard much of him from him this year. But I thought that was pretty interesting. So that way we can, recognize the Devin Bookers, the Luka Doncic's, the Giannis's, the guys that are going to get their numbers and have, and then we can also give, our thoughts on who the breakout stars of the bubble were. I'll actually let you go ahead and give what you want to do. Do you want to do your all breakout team or your all?
I kind of want to, since we just did all that build up, I think it would be fitting to do the breakout team. I know it's not exactly in accordance with our timeline that we established, but I like it. For me. I'm going to lead off with a guy that you didn't have on your roster at all, and it makes me happy to see Troy Brown Jr. for the Washington Wizards. I thought, I didn't even really consider him much until I did more research today. And it was just like, because who watches the Washington Wizards, especially without all their star talent, right?
Right.
So when I was looking for a breakout guy, I originally was going to have Cameron Payne because of the job that he's doing in Phoenix, kind of bolstering their second unit, right? And if anybody wanted to make an argument for Cam Payne, I wouldn't disagree with them. I've been very impressed. But just hear me out real quick on Troy Brown Jr., right? 15 points per game, 4.7 assists, 7.1 rebounds, 0.8 steals. Now, his efficiency leaves a little bit to be desired, right? Only shooting 39% from the field. He's almost largely a jump shooter, though, where in three-point percentage he has 31%, and he's shooting 94.7% from the free throw line, right? So the Wizards are obviously, they stink. They fell behind teams that aren't even in the bubble, right? But if we're talking about specifically breakout teams, I don't think that, or a breakout player, I don't think that team success really has a lot to do with the playing, right? And if you look at the people that he has to work with around him, you can kind of excuse his kind of inefficiency on the offensive end.
Yeah.
My second guard I have is Gary Trent Jr. from the Portland Trailblazers. I don't think that I'm going to get fought very much on this one. He's averaging 17 points a game, 1.4 assists, 1.5 rebounds, a steal, shooting 52.5% from the field, 52.6% from the three-point line, so most of his shooting is from outside, and 77.7% from the free throw line. You'd like to see that number get up a little bit since he's just killing it from outside, right? My first forward that I have is Duncan Robinson. Every game I watch Miami play, I always find myself saying that Robinson is just a bad man. I feel like I'm sounding like Stephen A. Smith when I say it about Aaron Rodgers, right? But Duncan Robinson is just a bad man. He's averaging 16.8 points per game, 1.1 assists, 2.4 rebounds, 0.6 blocks. I don't think he gets talked enough about his help defense abilities, right? He's not a good one-on-one guy. 49.2% from the field, 41.5% from deep, and he's taken crazy shots from outside. And he's also 100% from the free throw line in the bubble so far. My other forward that I have is Mikal Bridges. He's shooting 12.5 points per game, 1.5 assists, 4.1 rebounds, 1.2 steals per game, 0.8 blocks, 46.2% from the field, 38.7% from deep, and 82.3% from the free throw line. His offense is not why I have him in here, although it's not bad, Austin. It's his defense. He's been just a beast on the defensive end. And then I went with another forward. So when I was constructing this team, Austin, I went with kind of like the all rookie, teams that they have, where they have 2 backcourt and 3 front court guys. So we'll talk about this guy a little bit later. I won't run down his stats now because I want to talk about it when we get to our all NBA team or all bubble NBA teams. But it's Michael Porter Jr. It rounds out my breakout team.
Awesome. Okay, we're in a lot of agreement on all of this. I don't want to sound too redundant. My only difference is my first guard instead of Troy Brown, which, like you said, Washington's just an afterthought, so I never even considered them when I was doing my research. So good job finding him. Gary Trent Jr., I have him. I have Duncan Robinson. And I just want to put this out there. You can tell me you think I'm crazy. I don't care. And I think I'll be right in a couple of years. I think his ceiling is Klay Thompson. I think if he gets as good as he could, I think he could be Klay Thompson with a little bit better, attacking game.
He can put the ball on the floor too. I don't think his defense is there though.
Maybe not quite the level of Klay Thompson's defense, but offensively, I think he could be like another Splash Brother.
I think more like this generation's like JJ Redick or Kyle Korver. I think is kind of like where he's at.
Okay. Well,
personally,
I said what I said.
There you go.
And you said about Mikal Bridges, about his defense. I heard an interview with Cameron Payne today, and they said they call it putting players in Mikal jail. So you're right.
Oh, I like that.
You're right on that. I agree with you there. I agree with Michael Porter Jr. My only difference was I have Keldon Johnson from the Spurs. Now, Keldon Johnson, I think, is the epitome of what a breakout player is. He played 9 games all season for the Spurs. He was in the G League almost the whole year. And he had a 24-point game. He's had a 20-point game. He's averaging 12.7 points, 5 rebounds. He's shooting 63% from the field and 71% from three.
Yeah,
and
the exact opposite of what I said about Brown, right?
Right. And that's obviously probably not sustainable, but he was a good player at Kentucky. He was a blue chip recruit. I think, got a bright future. So that's my only difference from your team. I think all these guys really, showed out big time compared to what you would have expected. Michael Porter, maybe the only one that I kind of saw this coming because, before he had that back surgery, he was probably going to be the number 1 pick in the draft.
And you just saw him not getting a lot of opportunity either.
True. And, like a lot of the NBA is just guys getting a chance.
Wholeheartedly agree. Yeah. And Keldon Johnson, very, very solid pick. He's only averaging a little less than 3 points per game, less than my guy, and a little fewer rebounds. But the efficiency's there. I see what you're saying. I don't really have I am not blown away that you didn't have Troy Brown Jr. on your team.
Right.
Right on. Oh, so do you want to do second team or first team next?
I'll start with the second team. I'll go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
My second team first. I'll give you a heads up for everybody. You kind of went position by position for your all bubble teams.
Yes.
And I went a little bit more just kind of who I thought were the best 5 and the second best 5. So my all bubble second team is a little bit more by position. I had Karis LeVert of the Brooklyn basketball team, as you put it. I like the Brooklyn Nets. He has been a net for a few years, so I'll call him a net. 23.
He's earned that name, I guess.
23 points per game, 5 rebounds, 6 assists. He's a big guard. He can get to the rim, and I think everybody on the court kind of knows that he's about the only. He's the first option, second option, third option on offense probably at this point for that team, as shorthanded as they are, and he still put up good numbers. The other guard, I have James Harden. It was really hard to leave him off the first team, but I already have 3 or 4 guards on the first team, so we'll get to that.
Yeah, you do.
He's averaging 33, 8, and 9. He's almost at a triple-double. Nobody puts the ball in the basket better than James Harden. Not in today's NBA. He's one of the greatest scorers of all time. He's definitely the greatest scorer right now. And then I had Kawhi Leonard, another guy it was hard to keep out of the first team, but he's right there on the cuff of either one. 29 points per game, stellar defense again. He's shot terrific from 3 since the bubbles started. Not as efficient from 2, but his 3-point shooting has been fantastic. And then the other forward I have is Michael Porter Jr. I know you wanted to talk a lot about him. I'll let you kind of take the reins on that, but he is averaging 24 and 9. I think he's the first rookie since Blake Griffin to have back-to-back 30-point double-doubles. And, he's been terrific. And then I had Joel Embiid. I've got his stats right here. Before the last game where he was injured and he only played 5 minutes and 42 seconds. So in the first 4 games that he was back in the bubble, he was averaging 30 points and 13.5 rebounds on 54% from the field. Taking 11 free throws a game. So really active on the offensive end, playing great defense. A steal and a half a game, a block and a half a game, and it's too bad he got injured because he was having a great bubble experience. So that's my second team. I don't know what you think of it, or I know you definitely had some different pick than me.
Well, I did just, again, it was based off of structure, and this isn't anything that we talked about, so I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, because I think it's probably good, right? Because this is something that you hear about with all NBA teams in general, right? Like, do we need to get away from the traditionalist aspect of it, where it's like you have X amount of guards and X amount of forwards, and then you have to have a center, right?
Right.
That's where my mind went, because when I do these lists, I always keep the traditionalist list. I don't go with the best five. And again, by way of giving these teams, by no means am I saying that the first team center is a better player than my second team's guard. And I want people to remember that specifically for this conversation, right? By no means am I saying that my first team center is better than my second team's guards, either one of them.
Right.
I went solely by position. So my second team, this may break people's hearts, but Luka Doncic is my starting point guard of my second team. Now you may ask, how could this be? My first point guard is just having a better bubble, right? And that's the other thing. This is based off of solely the bubble, right? And another thing that I want people to keep in mind is if players sat out more than a game, and then if they sat out more than a game and then most of another game, I didn't have them. So I'll just go ahead and spoil this. I don't have Giannis on either one of my teams specifically for that reason, right? So for the bubble, since it's such a small sample size, to me, if you miss more than a game and you missed a lot of other aspects, like, okay, sorry, like, you don't get to make this made-up award, right?
Good criteria.
Yeah, right? So Luka Doncic is my starting point guard. He's averaging 32 points per game, 11.3 assists, 11 rebounds, 0.3 steals, 47.4% from the field, 29.1% from three, and 78.1% from the stripe. And you may ask, how on earth could I have someone averaging a triple-double on my second team? The only way that I can respond to you is efficiency, right? And also, like, his team hasn't performed as well as my other starting guard, right? So in terms of win-loss record, right? So that's why Luka is on here. Now, another guy that I have on here is Devin Booker, right? These two, from everything that I'm hearing and reading everywhere else, these are the two MVP favorites for the bubble for a lot of people. But they're both on my second team. And a guy that I don't even really like is on my first team, and I'll make his case when we talk about that. But Devin Booker's averaging 31 points per game, 6.1 assists, 4.5 rebounds, half a steal, 49.6% from the field, 34.8% from deep, and he's taking stupid shots, 93.5% from the free throw line. Now, when I got to these position-specific matchups, my second team forwards were kind of hard to choose. I ended up going with Jason Tatum as my three here. He's averaging 22.4 points per game, 3.7 assists, 6 rebounds, 1.4 steals, half a block, 46.9 from the field, 44.9% from three, and 85.2% from the stripe. His efficiency is why I have him over other guys such as LeBron James, such as Chris Middleton, such as DeMar DeRozan, any other forwards having a greater, maybe have higher numbers in some areas, right? And again, that's excluding guys that missed, more than a game and then extended periods throughout a game. So like Pascal Siakam and Giannis, those guys were out of here. Michael Porter Jr., I'll run through those numbers since you were gracious enough to let me do so. 23.8 points per game, 1.5 assists per game, 9.1 rebounds per game, 1 steal a game, 0.8 blocks per game, 56.8% from the field, 46.3% from deep, and 96% from the free throw line. Just absolute monster numbers. And he didn't even play as much in their first bubble game as he did later on. So you would have to imagine that some of these numbers would probably climb. And then his teammate Nikola Jokic is my center on my second team. 20.6 points per game, 8.5 assists per game, 6.6 rebounds per game, 1.3 steals per game, only 0.1 blocks per game, 50% from the field, 32% from deep, and 89.6% from the free throw line. So that rounds out my second unit there, Austin.
Hey, I don't really have any arguments if you're going the traditional position by position. I think it's sometimes it's okay to award, a center just because he's one of the best two centers. But I do like giving, the best five and the next best five. It's kind of just more my feel on it, especially if we're doing an all bubble team for 8 games.
Sure.
Jason Tatum, I like him. You're a lot higher on him than I am. I'm kind of a Jason Tatum hater, I guess. I always have been. I don't know if that's because he plays for the Celtics. He's good. I think he's just the next tier down. But I don't have any problems with your second team. Luka is a little ridiculous. I don't know how you don't have him on the first team, but
I'll talk about it.
Efficiency. Oh, I know. We'll get to it. I don't. It's not the craziest thing I've ever heard, but I disagree. Booker, I like Devin Booker a lot. I'll go ahead and give you guys my number one team now, my all breakout first, or my all bubble first team. Sorry. So I had Luka. Obviously, he's averaging the triple double, like you said, and I also have Damian Lillard, and I also have Devin Booker. So I have 3 guards. Dame time showed up big time last night.
Mm-hmm.
He's averaging 37 points per game. The basketball gods are obviously on his side. If you saw that bounce that he got, that was crazy. The ball completely went off the screen and came back right in, and he was about 35 feet away. That was incredible. TJ Warren is the only reason that Kawhi wasn't on this first team. He's just played out of his mind, 33 points per game. He didn't. I think he's out with either. I think they're officially saying a foot injury, but I think it's probably more just rest to get ready for the playoff.
Sure.
But he's been leading that team, and he's played out of his mind except for the last game against Miami. I did not keep Giannis out because he sat out. I think he's been as good as he was all year. He's averaging 27.8 points and 12.5 rebounds. I think he only played like 10 or 12 minutes in the last game. Before that, he was at like 31 and 13.5, which is about where he's been all year. And Devin Booker, I think Devin Booker is got to be in the running for, like you said, the MVP of the bubble. He had another 35-point game. He just actually broke the Suns' career record for 30-point games, and he did it in less than half the games the other guy had the record in.
Right.
He's always been able to score, but it's never really seemed to add up to wins. And now all of a sudden, look like they're the best team in the NBA since the bubble came back.
Yeah, sometimes he's had multiple 30-point games just in one game by himself. So
right. Yeah, he had that 70-point game. So he's always been a big time scorer, but I just think he's putting a lot more of his game together, and it's not just empty stats anymore. And he would actually probably be my pick if I had to pick a bubble MVP, which I did hear that they are going to announce. So I'm interested to hear your first team, and I know we didn't talk about this, but if you have to pick a bubble MVP, I want to know who it is too.
Okay. Well, I'll start off with my bubble MVP being my first team point guard, and that is Damian Lillard, averaging 37 points per game, 9.2 assists per game, 4.4 rebounds per game, 1.2 steals. He's shooting 48.4% from the field, 44.4% from deep, and 88.7% from the free throw line. I just think that he's the bubble MVP to me, which is why I have him over Luka. And he's averaging 5 more points per game, so even though he's giving up about 2 assists and a boatload of rebounds to Luka, right? He's averaging almost an entire steal per game more than Luka. Mm-hmm. He's shooting better from every aspect of the field, and to me, he's willing. His team has the better record too over Luka when it comes to this bubble tournament. So that's why I have him over Luka Doncic, even though he's averaging that triple double. Shooting 47% from the field, 29% from deep, and 78% from the stripe. To me, it doesn't really. It kind of evens itself out, and the record gives, Dame the edge. Now, the reason why I have Devin Booker on the second team is because a guy that is not getting talked about nowhere near enough, and it pains me. I want you to understand, Austin. It pains me in my soul to give this guy the amount of credit and props that I'm about to give him. But James Harden.
Okay.
James Harden is. When have we ever said that James Harden is quietly having a good stretch? We've never been able to say that. Like, that's how crazy this bubble is. James Harden is averaging 33.4 points per game, 8.6 assists, 7.6 rebounds, 3 steals per game, 51.6% from the field, 33.3% from deep, and 90.3% from the free throw line. The fact that James Harden is averaging more points than both Luka and Devin, he's averaging more assists than Booker, and rebounds than Booker. He's averaging far and away more steals per game and is far and away more efficient in every aspect other than the 3-point and free throw percentage from Devin Booker. All of that to me shows that he deserves to be all bubble first. And again, I want to throw up, my tongue is on fire right now for speaking so highly of a guy that I just cannot stand to watch as a player. But a lot of the things that he has done that I think has carried, that has built a reputation the way it is, where that foul-seeking behavior has actually toned down a lot in the bubble.
It has, definitely.
And his defense has ramped up a ton in this bubble.
Well, not only that, a lot of people don't realize this. James Harden's in the top 20 in the NBA in defensive rating and defensive win shares this year.
Most steals by a guard since 2012, I believe.
He's been a above average defender this year. He has had a much better defensive season, and I think a lot of that is, guys used to say he just didn't try on defense, and I think he's just putting in more effort now. He's a little bit older. Everybody matures at a different rate. I've never been the biggest Harden fan either. I don't have as much disdain for him as you do. I actually like his game. I think if you can,
it hurts me, Austin. It hurts me.
If you can exploit something, you should. Now, it's not the prettiest to watch. I agree with that, and it hasn't brought them the title that they think it should. But it'd be hard. I'd be hard pressed if I was James Harden and the coach came to me and said, "Okay, you're going to take 70% of our shots. You're going to have the ball the whole game." Is he going to say no? I don't
think any NBA player says no.
Exactly. It's not all. I think if they, Westbrook's been a good compliment to him this year. It's funny that I saw another eye-opening stat about Harden is he has the most missed field goals this year. He has the most three-point attempts this year, and then Russell Westbrook has the most two-point attempts this year. So they're just like the most ball-dominant 1-2 about ever. But no, he's been terrific in the bubble, and I want to give a caveat about Devin Booker. Devin Booker is my MVP pick, and he's on my first team. If they lose their last game or they weren't undefeated, he would probably drop all the way out of that MVP race and drop down to my second team. I just think leading an undefeated team that, like I said before, has played a murderer's row lineup or schedule. I just think something has to be said about that, and that's why I put him as high as I did.
Well, to counter that, right? Like James is 4-2 with no traditional big man at all.
Right.
Not even a traditional 4. He's
true.
There's been games where he has guarded Kristaps Porzingis and locked him up. Even against the Bucks, he guarded Giannis and did a really good job. I almost want to take back almost every bad thing I've ever said about him, except it makes me want to throw up if I say that too much, right? So moving on with the rest of my first team, I have Kawhi Leonard as my number one small forward, right? 29.4 points per game, 4.6 assists, 4.8 rebounds, 1.8 steals, 0.4 blocks, 46% from the field. How about this? 51.7% from deep. And then he's 86.3% from the free throw line. Yeah, crazy, right? So, I have him there. Kawhi Jr., TJ Warren, I have him at the 4 here. He's 31 points per game, 2 assists per game, 6.3 rebounds per game, 1.3 steals, 1.1 blocks, 57.8 from the field, 52.3% from deep, and 88% from the free throw line. And then, to me, still the best center. I talked about this earlier. Joel Embiid. I didn't exclude that very short stint in his last game. Even including that, he's averaging 24.4 points per game, 2.8 assists, 11.6 rebounds, a steal, a block, 51.1% from the field. Terrible three-point percentage. I'll just go ahead and put this out there. Less than 1% from 3. right? But 76% from the free throw line. So take away that 3-point percentage, I think that he's still doing better. Yeah, even with that inefficiency, he's averaging more points and rebounds than Nikola Jokic, and obviously blocks. And he's about as efficient in almost every other aspect except free throw, right? So I just think, honestly, his importance to the team, because Ben Simmons hasn't played well. Like, you can say, well, he had Ben Simmons. He has not had the Ben Simmons that anyone has remembered from this regular season.
Right.
He was his 40-20 game that he had earlier in the bubble was dwarfed because he just so happened to be going up against Kawhi Jr. and TJ Warren, and he just, Kawhi Jr. just dwarfed that game. But
yeah, he gave him a 50 piece. Of course he did.
Yes, he did. But yeah, that's my first team, man.
Okay, I like it. If you're going traditional by position, I have no problem with anybody you picked. I think, if you, I want to ask you, if you had to do it my way, would you put Luka on your first team if it weren't for, like, you went by positions? Or do you think him and maybe Dame would have been in there together?
Yeah, I probably would have taken out even Kawhi. I probably would have took out Kawhi and Joel and put in Devin and Luka. So it would have been Devin, Luka, Dame, Harden, and probably TJ Warren as my top 5.
Okay, I just wanted to see what your thinking was on that, so we're kind of in agreement there. Cool.
Yeah, and again, that's because if a guy missed more than a game or a game and then extended time out of a game, he didn't make the cut for my roster this year. So
right, and then that's not something that I even thought of, but I like that for sure. Like you said, it's such a small sample size, so. I not any big agreements or disagreements. I agree with most of what you picked. Like I said, I just think you snubbed Luka a little bit there, but I get your thinking on it for sure.
Yeah, it was. I mean, again, like as great as Luka's been, I mean, and people could see those triple doubles. People could see those triple doubles and fall in love with that, but he hasn't really been efficient. And we talked a little bit about this on our last show, right? Like, I'm still not in love with the KP Luka pairing as much. They're not as good as they should be. You know what I mean? And it's not because KP's injured anymore. Like, KP is basically back.
They seem like they haven't really found too good of a rhythm together. It's like they both can't be at their best when they're out there together, and I'm not sure why. It's almost like I just think Luka's so ball dominant. He has the ball so much, and Porzingis kind of thrives with the ball in his hands a little bit too. So I think that's up a little bit of it. They kind of play better when they both play better as the number one option, if that makes sense.
No, and it does. And I think that as this team continues to have more and more years together, if they don't improve in that area, you could probably start seeing a little bit of what we're seeing with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, because it's almost like the exact opposite, though. It's like they're almost too skilled to play with each other in a way. It's not like the complete mismatch and, they have to stand on the same side of the court. They don't. Like, they can both theoretically be anywhere on the court.
Yeah, that's true. It's the same problem, but for different reasons.
Exactly. Sure. But yeah, Austin, that wraps up our discussion for today. I just again wanted to thank you for all the hard work that you're putting in. You just wrote up a piece about the awards, and it is actually up now. Right before this recording, it has been uploaded to the website. So do you want to go ahead and share with the viewers and listeners about what you have posted up as far as the awards?
Yeah, definitely. I gave my first team, second team, third team All NBA. I gave my all defense teams, my rookie team. I did my individual awards. Make sure you head on over there and give it a read and listen to exactly why Steven's wrong and Billy Donovan is going to win Coach of the Year, at least in my opinion. No, but for real, I put a lot of work into it, so check it out if you want. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody that listens to the show, and I appreciate you too, Steven. I know you put in a lot of hard work. I see you on shows almost every other night. It seems like you're a busy man for sure. So,
well, I appreciate that. Yeah, and it's just I recently just started helping out with the MMA show to kind of be the moderator. I don't claim to be an expert in that field at all, but I feel like I can listen to a discussion and kind of help out with, different aspects to think about. But, I'll get better as we keep going there. And
Right. We all will.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got a bunch of other great pieces. Our guy, Stuart Brooking, I put up a link that he sent me about, the COVID, how it's affecting the NCAA season and, things to think about, things like that. So check that out. We're going to have our guy, Pat, just sent me today. It's got to go through the review process. But, for the upcoming, Stipe versus Cormier MMA fight for the weekend, that'll be up probably tonight or early tomorrow. So that'll be coming out. And, we're just going to keep pumping out these episodes. They'll be coming out every Thursday and every Monday, where we'll be recording every Sunday and Wednesday. And it's just been a lot of fun, Austin. I've greatly appreciated having you as a co-host, because not only does it help take a burden off of me, right, to where I feel like I have to, do everything by myself, but it's also just great having a guy that I know that I can count on, on a weekly basis, to have just good, healthy NBA conversation with someone who loves the game just as much, if not more. I don't know if I'm ready to seed that yet, right, but maybe just as much, the NBA as much as I do.
For sure, yeah, and I'm just happy to have a platform to, hear myself talk, and I appreciate you, having me on. And like you said, it's nice to have somebody to do the show with. We can kind of, argue a little bit, and I think we kind of have the same thoughts on a lot of things, but we do have some different lines of thinking, which is good. It's always nice to hear a different opinion other than your own.
Sure.
I will give you a tip about your MMA show, this upcoming fight. If you want to sound like you know what you're talking about, pick Sugar Sean O'Malley.
We did.
Okay, good.
We picked Sugar Sean, yeah, no doubt.
Yeah,
but Vera could hurt him though. Vera could hurt him.
I think Sean O'Malley is the future of the UFC though.
Yeah, and that's largely what our guys at allaspectsports.com, our MMA guys, Phil and Pat, they feel the same way. Although they do have a little bit of different understanding of whether he should be, fighting headliners now or later. I'm of the mindset to where, like, if you lose, you want to lose to the best. But Phil had brought up a great point that if you lose to those guys early, you create almost like a glass ceiling for yourself, to where it's a mental block, to where you're like, crap, I got to fight this guy again, and I just lost to him. Can I hang with him, type thing. So. Yeah, lots to look forward to this weekend.
Definitely,
but yeah,
everybody, make sure you go over and check that show out too. It sounds like they have a lot of good stuff to talk about.
Yeah, and the show, it'll be released probably tomorrow as well. It's called The Verbal Octagon. It was a fun time recording that episode for sure. Yeah, awesome. Absolutely. But yeah, as for us here at Breaking the Game, right, you can follow us. You can look us up on anywhere podcasts are available. Breaking the Game. On iTunes, it's still a little tricky. You still have to search Breaking the Game with Stephen Gillespie, because we're still uploading more and more content. So there's a little bit of confusion there. But if you're on Spotify, look up Breaking the Game. If you want to follow us on social media, are you ready, Austin? I'm going to hit you up with Instagram first.
I'm ready.
You can follow us up on Instagram at BTG NBA Pod. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can look us up at that same name, at BTG NBA Pod. And as for myself, you can follow me on Twitter at StephenAAS, which is for All Aspect Sports, which is for our website, allaspectsports.com. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can follow me at Stephen W. Gillespie. Hit us up on Facebook. Hit us up on social media. Email us at breakingthegamepodcast@gmail.com if you want to get some questions answered, or if you just want to tell us how great of a head coach Billy Donovan is. I won't read it, but I'll pass it along to Austin, and he can, tell you thank you for that. But Austin, man, we're gonna get out of here. I gotta go cook dinner and hang out with the fam. I know that you got work. I know you got to get some sleep soon to go.
Yeah,
to your real job.
I gotta get up pretty early, so
there you go. Well,
hey, enjoy your dinner, man. It sounds like it's much deserved. Congrats.
I appreciate you, brother. You want to say something nice to the people real quick?
Yeah, everybody, just thanks for the support. Make sure you head on over to the website, allaspectsports.com. Show us some love. If you want to, like he said, email the show. We'd love to hear what you think about it. If you have an idea for something we should do, or you want, something we should talk about on the show, we're more than happy to hear it out. We may not talk about it. I feel like we won't know more than probably you do. No, I'm kidding. But,
don't say that, man. Give them reason to email us.
I'm just joking.
I know.
No, for real though, we love hearing feedback. So get a hold of us on social media, like you said, or at the website. And thanks for listening.
Yeah, same thing, guys. Anybody watching now or listening now or later for either, this podcast is for you guys. We love talking about this stuff, and we love putting out content for people to listen to. But as for us here at the Break of the Game podcast, we've been your host. You, the listener, have been awesome. We will catch up with you guys next time. Much love, everybody.